Welcome to another Fascinator episode from Hat Collecting. On the main show, we take a big picture look at each guest's life, and here we take a magnifying glass and we learn about something more specific. I am your host, Lacey Artemis, and it is time to get fascinated. I am joined today by Kitty Stryker, who is a writer and activist. Kitty will be teaching us about street medicine and disaster prep kind of in general. Welcome to the show, Kitty.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yes, it's. I've been excited for this one. I'm very, very curious about this topic myself, and we did discuss a little bit before. What do you think is most fascinating about the process or the practice of like disaster prep and street medicine?
Well, I think what I find most fascinating is that a lot of the culture around, first I would say doomsday prepping and like disaster prepping is very different as a social thing from street medic work. A lot of the street medics that I know are in leftist communities. They're very focused on mutual aid, while a lot of the disaster prepping people are very individualist, very libertarian, very much focused on, I want to protect me and mine, and I don't care about the rest of you. So they're very different in that way, which is perplexing to me because I feel like disaster preparation is an extension of street medic work. So it feels like mutual aid is even more important in a disaster, which holds up on like some of the reading material. There's a great book, A Paradise Built in Hell, that talks about after a disaster, how communities tend to come together to take care of each other, almost despite the government and despite law enforcement. And I think that there's something really beautiful in that. But you don't really see that in the forums of prepping so much, which I find really weird.
Yeah, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the kind of the couple of the extra, like the link, the article that I sent to you. I don't know if it's too early to kind of get into that or not, but
Yeah, I did get to see it.
okay. I feel like that you just kind of brought it back to mind for me, so we might as well talk about it.
It was The Preppers, the Can Opener, and the Plight of the Homeless.
Yes, excellent. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So yeah, like as I was saying to you in my email about that, I don't know if you had seen that article before, but it was interesting to me because it was talking about sort of two different things that were related, and one of them was the fact that like these sort of doomsday preppers, particularly in Texas, when there was that big power outage recently, that a lot of them were like caught sort of with their pants down, so to speak, because they didn't anticipate not having power, and so they were kind of prepared for everything but that, which seems kind of silly, honestly. But also it was but it was also talking about how a lot of the items that are like really, really useful and valuable for homeless people are actually really cheap and easy to get a hold of. And it's like, why are we not like whatever store you choose to get them from, if not Amazon, and they could do so much good as opposed to a lot of the other things that people sort of first think about in terms of helping homeless people. So I guess I'll give you a second to kind of speak to both of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that first of all, as somebody who has been a prepper now for 7 or 8 years, yeah, being prepared for the power going out is like one of the most important things. Preparing for the idea that you might not be able to get fuel for your generator. So how are you going to keep food cold? And how are you going to cook when you don't have those things? Is something that, yeah, a lot of people who are in that prepping community, they spend a lot of money on a bunker or on guns, but they don't spend any money on food preparation and storage, which seems kind of backwards to me. Especially if you can't make your own bullets. Like there's going to be a point where you're going to need other people. And that I spent some time homeless, and that was kind of where a lot of my mutual aid focus came to be, because in the homeless communities that I was a part of, Like, people were not at their best a lot of the time, but they were available to help each other at some capacity. There was this understanding that we all needed to take care of each other, whether that be dealing with outside threats like law enforcement, or your tent is broken down. Well, I have a spare, I have a tarp, I have some duct tape, like we can help each other out. I feel like that's something that a lot of doomsday preppers, they haven't been in a real emergency. Like, they haven't suffered, and they're very scared of suffering. When you have suffered, there's sort of this feeling, like, there's this feeling of, well, I know what it feels like to have to sleep on the concrete and be concerned about my bag being taken from me. So now that I know what that's like, I'm not really scared of it anymore. And I'm probably more worried about the elements than I am worried about other people. That article was interesting to me because a lot of my street medic work is homeless outreach and like taking care of my unhoused neighbors. When there's a house fire, I always go and check on the encampments that are nearby and see, like, do you have masks to help with smoke inhalation? You know, because to me, that's part of the ecosystem of the place in which I live. And I'm super aware that when there is an earthquake, the skills that the homeless have in my area are going to be vastly superior to the skills that I have. There is this, like, both realizing the humanity in each other that comes from that, and a sense that no one is disposable, that I think is really, really important. I know, like, because I was homeless when I was younger, I was like in my late teens, I have never had that experience of just being able to ignore unhoused neighbors. Like, they've always been a part of my community, to an extent that that has frightened people I've dated before who just aren't used to that. They're not used to just like sitting down in an encampment and shooting the shit with somebody they don't know. But that was part of my gutter punk upbringing. So that doesn't feel any different from going to somebody's house. If anything, it feels safer because, like, if things go bad, the escape routes are many, you know? So, like, it's just interesting to me that doomsday preppers seem to have this idea that taking care of yourself is somehow going to be the thing that will keep you alive, when houseless folks that I know understand that having a community you trust to have your back, and taking care of each other, that's the thing that's going to actually keep you alive, because they do that all the time. And yeah, it is frustrating sometimes. I remember when I was unhoused, there was this lack of understanding what people actually needed, like that they needed access to running water, to showers, to clean socks, like wool socks, even better, you know, like there wasn't really any understanding of that. So there was this, oh, well, I'm going to get you a big fancy tent. Well, that's cool. But if I have to move my tent because the cops are coming to raid this area, I'm just going to lose that tent. It's actually more practical for me to have something that's easy to put up and take down and move with me than it is to have a, you know, multi-room tent. That feels very luxurious, but that's not really practical for the way in which I was living. So I think that there's this, what that article really hammered in for me was ask people what they need. Don't anticipate their needs. Ask them, hey, how can I help you out? You know, like a lot of people give canned food, for example. I think that was one of the things that they make a point of. But if you don't have a can opener, that canned food is not super helpful. If the can opener that you're given isn't good for your arthritic hands, then you're out of luck. And so, yeah, asking people what they need, providing them with that and not telling them what they need, and understanding that there's always gaps in your preparation, and how adaptable that you can be is way more important than having one of everything.
So I guess that's a good segue into the second question on my list here. I was curious in your experience, would you say that there are maybe like a top 5 most important items to have in a prep kit, or for kind of the most broad utility?
Whew, 5 items. God, I don't think I could narrow it down that much. But definitely things that I have in every single one of my go bags, of which I have several. Things that I keep in there: I keep duct tape, I keep gauze, I keep a bottle of water, preferably more than one, as much water as I feel comfortable carrying. I keep a pair of wool socks, a knife generally, just like a sharp knife, preferably with a whetstone, but you know, at least having a knife is helpful. If I'm adding to that, which I generally am, then I have medical shears, and I have a light source, a headlamp generally, but also a hand crank flashlight radio is very useful in a disaster situation. I also have slightly different bags for when I go to a protest versus when I'm worried about like earthquake stuff or fire safety. Every disaster needs some specific things, and then some general things. Like if you're like in the area I'm in, fire is more likely than flooding. So a lot of my prep stuff is with that in mind. I'm not as concerned about being warm and wet. That's not a thing that I'm as concerned about. I'm concerned about being too hot and dehydrated. So I tend to focus more on that. But I could be wrong. And that's one of the reasons why it's really important to have a community around you, so that any gaps in your preps, you've got other people. Gloves are super important.
I was just going to
Definitely.
ask, because I know when we spoke before that you had mentioned that the pandemic had helped you identify a couple of holes in some of your go bags. Can you briefly talk about that?
Yeah, Live Like the World is Dying, I think is the name of it, with Margaret Killjoy. She does this anarchist podcast about prepping of various types and like disaster preparedness. And we had been talking about what we had in our bags and what disasters we were preparing for. And I said, like, disease is one of the things that I prepare for. And this was 2 weeks before the pandemic hit. So it was a good time for me to test what I had. And I had way more masks than I needed, partially because that was part of my preparation for fire. I give out a lot of masks to unhoused neighbors because they can't escape the smoke in the way that housed people can. And they can't filter the air as well. So I had lots of masks, which was great. I was able to donate those to ER doctors and stuff in the area. I didn't have as much hand sanitizer as was recommended, but we had so much hand washing stuff anyway that it was really just a question of having something on the go if you didn't have access to running water. And we had lots of like antibacterial wipes and things like that as well. I'm trying to think what else. We had plenty of toilet paper, and we also have a bidet, so that was less of an issue in our house. That was some good preparedness and also just like little luxury stuff. The whole was, it would have been nice to have more stuff for going out, for like having to go to the store, things like that. But also it was really important to have enough information to know what was necessary. Like we didn't wipe down our bags from the store because what we knew about infectious disease suggested that the likelihood that it would linger on surfaces that it was that robust was fairly slim, and it was a risk that we were, as a household, willing to take. So we didn't need as much hand sanitizer as people who are like, I am disinfecting every surface, every time, every doorknob. We wore gloves most of the time, and that cut down on the need to do that.
Another question that I had here, kind of in a similar vein, I'm the sort of person, I tend to cobble together more crude solutions to things a lot, either if I'm just unable to easily access the thing that would really do what I'm trying to do, or
Mhm.
whatever. And I imagine that some degree of that kind of like DIY MacGyvering kind of thing is ultimately required in the field. But is that generally like, do you generally try to avoid that as much as possible, or is it like encouraged, like, no, it's good to have these creative skills to be able to use things for things they weren't necessarily intended for?
I remember the first couple of times I went out as a street medic, I had the exact right kind of medical tape and like different types of sticky gauze and all this stuff. And like, honestly, it took maybe 2 times being out there before I was like, people are too sweaty for medical tape. So what I need is I just need sterile gauze and duct tape. And if they are allergic to latex, then we can work on like tying it to them or maybe like trying to do medical tape. But like most of the time, it was perfectly fine to use duct tape. And that was more likely to stay stuck on. So like there's definitely a certain amount of being able to MacGyver something out of what you have around. Like, okay, there's some popsicle sticks, or, you know, oh, I can use like a splinter from this protest sign to make a finger splint. Cool, like we've got this. Shout out to Odyssey of the Mind. My parents put me through that program as a kid, and I think that kind of thinking on the go really helped. But for the most part, I try not to carry more weight than is really necessary. I try to keep in mind what my environment is, how close to danger do I plan on being. I carry stuff with me to deal with bullet wounds, but I'm also super aware that I am someone who is just trying to keep someone alive until EMTs get there. So like I don't have as much confidence in those skills, and I hope to God I never have to test them out. I did get training, but it's different when you're on the ground. I think what's most important about being able to say, okay, this isn't working, let's try something else, is that in an emergency, especially if you're in a position of presumed authority, people are going to look to you to have an answer. And you have to be able to have confidence in like your almost muscle memory of like, this is what we do when this happens. And also confidence enough that you can say, this isn't working and I'm going to stop trying this and I'm going to move on to another solution. Because that can be an issue if you're like trying to fix something and it's not working, but you don't know what else to do. You can lose valuable time. Also, knowing who else is on the ground with you. Again, there's so much of this stuff comes back to community. And like, I know that when I go out as a street medic, I've trained other people now to be able to handle things like sprained ankles or dehydration or headaches or tear gas exposure. So I can focus on people who have a cut and have serious bleeding, or who, you know, might have a face injury of some kind. I can focus my energy on that because I have people trained around me who are better at the smaller things. And then I also generally know people on the ground who are better than me at certain things. So I don't have to go to the police for help. And I mean, sometimes the police will try to keep street medics away from somebody who's injured and will target street medics because they're very aware that if you get the street medics out, the protest is going to have a hard time sustaining because people freak out. So like being able to respond quickly to the scenario that's happening and also outsmart the cops constantly is like a very specific skill set that won't help me get employed, but is super useful when it comes to like emergency preparedness.
Hmm. So something, a new question that's popped into my head as you've been giving this answer. So I've been out at a few protests in the past, and usually there is like one or two street medics present, and thankfully, in my experiences, they've pretty much never been needed. But in a situation, if something does, a situation does develop, and they kind of spring into action for like the non-street medics, is it better to kind of like just give them space and leave them alone, or should you like maybe ask, be like, can I help you, or can I get you anything, or is like, yeah, is it better to give them space and let them do their thing, or try to help?
Giving a certain amount of space, but also being a barrier. What happens a lot is the media and the chuds really want to get photos of people being injured at protests on either side, because they will manipulate it to be that like depending on the way that they want to frame it. They'll be like, haha, look, we beat up these soy boys, or alternately, oh no, these dangerous Antifa have attacked us. Oh, it's horrible. Because they will purposefully, and I blame the media for this too, and I am part of the media, they will trim the footage that they get to whatever is most favorable and will get them the most views. And so one thing that's really helpful is to like physically like block with your body the people who are getting help, so that those photos can't be taken, so that people can't be identified. That's super helpful. And that also creates like a little bit of room so that we can do our work. We can throw our backpacks down and go through it and whatever. That's really helpful. Also, like I know for myself as a street medic, I'm very good at saying, I need you to do this. I need you to go and do this. I need water, you go. But that's bystander intervention training. So I find that when something is happening, everyone will wait for someone to tell them what to do. And I like to be the person who will tell them what to do. So that way things get done. Because as a society, we're very accustomed to waiting for an authority to come and solve the problem on our behalf. It's scary. There's a lot of fear of like, what if I do something wrong? What if I'm not an authority on this thing? And so asking what do you need can be helpful. Also, depending, like some street medics are just going to be like, like I'm focused on this person. I cannot instruct you. I do try to encourage street medics to get some bystander intervention training so that you become a lot more comfortable ordering people around, because I've been able to do so much better at a protest because I know who has the shields, and they know to create a ring around wherever I am. And so we have like a sort of multi-tiered process, like round up, and everybody will just sort of like come into place. It's so weird. Like I'm not like a military, like plan things out kind of person, but I've learned to have some tactics and to have people with me on the ground who know exactly what I'm talking about, so that I can focus a little faster on the person who needs help and not on like crowd management. If you don't see a medic, shouting for a medic and putting a hand up so that we can figure out who needs help, that's super helpful, because we're usually listening out for that. Getting the person who is injured to the side as much as possible, out of the street and to the side, helps both in terms of like cameras and like preventing cameras, because now you've got a wall in the way, but also like helps prevent them getting more injured and gives them a sense of some stability. So that can be super helpful. So much of it is like dependent on the environment, dependent on are the cops trying to kettle you? Like sometimes you have to be able to help somebody on the run. And that's going to be a very different strategy.
Yeah, so I've got 3 questions left on the list, but I'm maybe you should try to roll them together, see if you can kind of give like a combined answer. So the three questions I kind of have left here, I'm just kind of aware of the time. So the one I was gonna ask was like in your experience in the work that you do thus far, has there been like a kind of big, like something really a surprising lesson or like a surprising takeaway that you've gotten? I have, what do you wish more people would ask you about street medicine, but they don't? And kind of whatever other advice you might want to give to someone who might be interested in getting more into this themselves.
Yeah, actually, I can kind of roll that all up into one thing. First, everyone can get street medic training, and I think everyone should. It is useful for so many things. Even if you never go to a protest, it is useful if there's a car accident. It's useful if there's a natural disaster. It's useful if you're camping. You know, like it's such a wide-ranging group of useful skills that I recommend everybody get at least a basic medic training, just so that you have some confidence that you know how to handle these situations. And that's fantastic. The more people we have out there who have CPR training and basic medic skills and can de-escalate, the better. So everyone should go and do that. There's sometimes you'll have a training locally. Generally, if you talk to your whatever mutual aid projects are happening, they are generally, the ones that I know of are almost always leftist groups. So if you talk to like the DSA or I'm not sure what groups that would be in Canada, but I mean, you know, your local leftists, they'll have an idea. And if they don't know someone, they'll know who to ask. Also, a lot of like overdose prevention and like Narcan distribution groups will have some sort of medic training and some idea of like how to make that happen. There are medic trainings on YouTube, I think now there's some available. I do recommend trying to do it in person if at all possible, but it is also nice to brush up on your skills with watching some videos. It's just some of this stuff is stuff that like you need to learn how to do with your hands, and you might need another person to do that. But a lot of street medics are pretty excited to teach other people what we know and are delighted because we're like, oh yes, that way that's less on my plate when I'm out there. Absolutely, I'll teach you. We'll do it for food, just feed us. So there's that. And I wish that people knew that it's not that hard. Like, I was a little intimidated. I have ADHD, and I was really nervous that what if I forget something important? There's this rhythm you get into. Honestly, most of the time at a protest, the things that you're going to deal with are people who've twisted their ankles and people who are dehydrated. That's most of what you're going to handle. And de-escalation. Even just having those skills, you'll be helpful in like 90% of cases. I would say like it feels really great to have that information. So I really encourage people to check it out. It feels good to be able to help people.
Absolutely. In whatever way that you can find to do that, certainly. Well, thank you so much. This has been very
Yeah,
interesting for me,
absolutely.
and I hope for my audience as well. So yeah, wrapping up the show here, where can people find you and what you do online?
Well, people can find me at kittystryker.com. I'm on Medium as Kitty Stryker. I'm on TikTok as Kitty Stryker, pretty much Kitty Stryker everywhere.
Mhm.
I will say I have worked in the adult industry, so don't Google me when you're at work, just in case. You want to make sure that you're not getting spicy content when you shouldn't be. Pretty much all social media, I'm Kitty Stryker there, and I'm very open to people asking me questions. So please, if you're curious about street medic stuff, if you want some help connecting to local resources, then you can send a message my way.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll definitely have graphical overlays on the screen for people, and the information will be in the description on the video. You can find this show online at hatcollecting.com and at hatcollecting on social media. You can find me online at artemiscreates.com, or you can find out all the other different things that I do. Please like and subscribe and tell your friends to help the show grow and keep the fascination flowing. And until next time, look forward to your next fascination.
I'm Kitty Stryker, and you've been fascinated.